Hello friends, we have started new series in English, The Greatest Economist. First topic we discuss about Adam Smith. We are making second most greatest theoretical economist of all time, David Ricardo. In this series, we will discuss every sides of the greatest economist, his thoughts, his life up and downs, and how they achieve success in this field. As an economist, they analyze the various topics related to the how the country get more growth, related GDP, per capita income, production, distribution, and consumption. They make a new theory for the nation growth. When we know about Adam Smith as the father of economists, who was the first explorer of economics. After that, Ricardo was the one of those rare people who they achieved the more success and lasting fame. Ricardo first gained the notice among the economists over the bullion controversy in 1809. He wrote that the England's inflation was the result of this the Bank of England propensity to the issue excess the banknotes. David Ricardo was the first gain notice among the economists over the bullion controversy in 1809. In shortly, Ricardo was the earlier believer in the quantity theory of money in this know today as the monetarism. Ricardo, the greatest contribution to the economics is the provision of engine of analyze. Ricardo theoretical model help to us to understand how the system work and how the changes in the variable affect the working of the economic system. David Ricardo was the classical economist best known for his theory of wages and profit, the labor theory of value, the theory of comparative advantage, and theory of rate. David Ricardo and several other economists also though simultaneously and independently discovered the law of diminishing marginal returns. His most well-known work in Principle of Political Economy and Taxation is published 1817. David Ricardo was the classical economist who developed the several key theories that remain influential in economics. Ricardo was the successful investor and the member of parliament who took up the writing about the economics after the retiring young from the fortunes. Ricardo, the best known for these theories of the comparative advantage, economic rents, and the labor theory of value. Ricardo widely acclaimed the comparative advantage theory, suggested that the nation can gain the international trade advantage when they focus on the producing goods that produce the lowest opportunity cost as the compare to other nations. And also, Ricardo suggests that the goods value is determined by the labor hour invested in its production. David Ricardo began the working with his father as the stockbroker. At age of 14, he was the discovered by his father at 21. To know more about David Ricardo as a personal detail, he was born in 18 April 1772 in London. He was dead in 11 September 1823 aged 51 in England. Us know more about the contribution in economic field, Ricardian equivalence, labor theory of value, comparative advantages, law of diminishing return, Ricardian socialism, and economic rent. David Ricardo was one of 17 children. David Ricardo began the working with his father as a stockbroker at the age of 14. He was disowned by his father as 21. However, for the marrying outside his religions, his wealth come from the successful with the business. He started that the deal with the government securities. He retired at the age of 41 after earning as the estimated euro 1 million, speculating on this the outcome of the Battle of Waterloo. After retirement, David Ricardo purchased the seat in Parliament for euro 4,000 and he served as the Member of Parliament Influenced by the Adam Smith, David Ricardo held the company with other leading thinking of the time such as James Mill, Bentham and Thomas Malthus. Ricardian system considered the agriculture as the most important sector of economy. The difficulty of the providing the food to expanding population in the main problem. David Ricardo assumed there are three major groups in the economy: first, landlord; second, capitalist; and third, labor, among whom this the entire productive land is distributed. It is the capitalist who initiate the process of economic development in the society by reinvesting profits and increasing the capital formation. First topic we are discussing about the production function. Ricardo production function assumes the existence of the three factor: land, labor, capital, and thus is the subjected to the restriction of this the diminishing marginal productivity due to the perfectly inelastic of the land. It is a variable quality regarded the economic development as the process of these the factor of production. The marginal productivity of land, labor, and capital decline with the increase in cultivation. In agriculture sector, the rate of innovation introduced would be insufficient to the affect the tendency for the diminishing return to sit in the either intensive or extensive marginal of cultivation. Thus, introduction of the improvements in the agriculture techniques might check the process of the diminishing return. It could have temporary affect the cost of agriculture product. In agriculture sector, the rate of innovation introduced will be the insufficient to the affect the tendency for the diminishing return to the set of the either intensive or existing marginal of cultivation. Thus, the introduction of the improvement of the agriculture techniques might check the progress of diminishing return could have the temporary affect the cost of agriculture production. For the overall the growth of the economy is necessary for the examine to the which of these pattern prevail with the respect to the output of the industry and agriculture together. Ricardo is opinion that although then is the probable that under the most favorable circumstance the power of the production is still greater than that the population. It will not long continue so, for the land being the limited in the quantity with the quality and differing in the quality. With every increased portion of the capital employed on there will a decrease rate of production while the power of the population continues the always to the same. As the Adam Smith economy grow at the acceleration rate, Ricardian economy develop as the progressively slow pace. Ricardian production function as given y is equal function of k and l. Obviously, y is the national income, k is the capital, n for labor, l for land, and obviously f is a function. Next point is very important: capital accumulation. David Ricardo explained about the rate of capital accumulation as a capital act on the engine of growth. Capital is the part of the wealth of the country which is the employed in the production and consists of the food, clothing tools, raw material, machinery, etc. necessary to give the effect to the labor. Capital accumulation depends upon the two factors. First, capacity to save. Second, will to save. The capacity to the save is more important to the capital accumulation. This depends upon the net income of the society, which is the surplus out of the total output after the meeting the cost of worker subsistence. The larger the larger surplus will be the capacity to the save. Landlord and the capitalist invest the through this the surplus of the size of the surplus depend upon the rate of profit. David Ricardo also discuss about the profit rate. The rate of profit is the ratio of the profit to the capital employed, but since capital consists of the working capital, it is equal to the wage bill. So as long as the rate of the profit is positive, the process capital accumulation will the continue and the economy will progress. The labor force will be grow proportionally and the total wages fund will increase. The profit depend upon the wages on the price of the corn, and price of the corn on the fertility of the marginal land. Hence, profit and wages are the inversely proportionate to the each other. When there is an improvement in the agriculture, the productivity power of the land increase and there is a fall in the price of corn. And as the result, subsistent wage also falls, but profit increase and there is a more capital accumulation. This will increase the demand of labor and wage rate will rise, which will increase in population and demand for the corn and its price. Since the wages rise, the profit will decline and there will be less capital accumulation. The process of the growth will continue till the profit fall to zero or whole the total product less is used for the maintenance of the labor at subsistence level. At this the stage, capital accumulation stop and the process of the economy reach the stationary state. Next point is increasing in wages. In Ricardian scheme, wages play as the active role in the determining in income between capital and labor. The wages rate depend upon the number of the worker and the wage fund. The wage rate fall with the increase in number of the worker. If the wage rate is sufficient to enjoy the comfort of the life by the laborer, the population is expected to increase, and if the wage rate is the lowest, working class cannot meet the necessities of the life. The population will decrease. Thus, there the positive correlationship between the wages rate and size of the population. The increase in the wages with the increase in population. Observe the rise of the price of the corn, since wage also the increase, profit decline. There's the opposite tendency ultimately related to the capital accumulation. Next point is Corn Law. In 1850, another controversy rise over the Corn Law, which regulated the import and export of the grain. A decline in the wheat price had led to Parliament to the rise of the tariff on import wheat. This provoked of the popular outcry and the causes Ricardo to publish his essay on the influence of the law price of corn on the profit of the stock in 1815, in which they argued that the rising the tariff of the grain import tended to the increase to rents of the country gentlemen while the decreasing in profit of manufacturers. Later, the principle of the political economy and taxation was published in 1870. Ricardo analyzed the law determining distribution of the everything that could be produced by the three classes of the community, mainly landlord, the worker, and the capital. As a part of this theory, distribution has included that the profit inversely with the wages, which rise of the fall in the line with the cost of necessities. Ricardo also determined that the rent tend to increase as the population grow. Higher cost of cultivation, more food for the larger population. He supposed that there was the little tendency to unemployment but remained guarded against the rapid population growth could depress wages to the subsistence level, which would thereby the limit both the profit and capital formation by the extending the marginal of the cultivation. He also concluded that the trade between the countries was influenced by the relative cost of the production and by difference in the internal price structure that could maximize the comparative advantage for these trading countries. Next point is labor theory of value. David Ricardo worked to fix the issue of the field were most concerning with the Adam Smith's the labor theory of value. Both men worked with the assumption that land, labor, and capital were three basic factors of production. However, Smith narrowed in of the labor as the determinant of value. Ricardo believed that the production having the three factor it is impossible for only one of them that determine the value on its own. Ricardo illustrated his point by adapting the Smith-Deer-Beaver analogy to show the even when the labor is the only factor production, the hardship of the tool to labor will drive a wage in the relative value of the goods. Due to his critiques of the labor theory of the value, George Stigler called theory as the 93% labor theory of value. David Ricardo's most famous work in The Principle of Political Economy and Taxation was published in 1870. He advanced the labor theory of value explained in this book. The value of the commodity or the quality of the other commodity for which is will exchange depend the relative qualities labor which the necessary for is the production and not on the greater or less compensation which the paid for the labor production. Next point is explain about the rent, wages and profit. David Ricardo contributed to development of the theories of rent, wages and profit. He defined rent as the difference between the produce obtained by the employment of the two equal quantities of the capital and labor. And his explanation about the wages and profit. David Ricardo stated the real wages increases, real profit decreases because of the revenue from this the sale of the manufactured goods is the split between the profit and wages. He say in his essay on the profit depend on the higher or low wages, wages on the price of the necessaries and the price of the necessaries chiefly on the price of food. Next point is explain about the Ricardian theory of international trade. Between 1500 to 1750, most economists advocated mercantilism, which promoted the idea of the international trade for the purpose for earning the billion by the running as a trade surplus with the other countries. Ricardo challenges the idea that the purpose of the trade was the merely accumulated gold or silver with the comparative advantage. Ricardo argued in the favor of the industry specialization and free trade. He suggested that the industry specialization combined with the free international trade always process the positive result. This theory expanded of the concept of the absolute advantage. Next point is given the importance of the comparative advantage. Adam Smith argued that about the absolute advantage was refined and developed by the David Ricardo in 1817. David Ricardo improving the upon the Adam Smith expositions is extended and the development of the theory of the international trade based on the what is the know as the principle of comparative advantage. International trade involves the extension of the principle of the specialization or division labor to the sphere of international exchange. As the per specialization in the trade which is the has the best advantage is for the country, also specialization in the production of this the commodity in which is has the best natural advantage. Country A may be produce many things at the time, but it may have the comparative advantage in the production of the some commodities over the other, and it is the will specialization in the those countries and those goods. Similarly, another country B, would produce those the goods in which has the comparative advantage. If these the two countries produce goods according to their the respective areas of the comparative advantage, each country would be able to produce the goods at the lowest cost, and both these the countries will gain from the trading with each other. This is the subsistence of the principle of the comparative advantage. The principle of the comparative cost stated that country A international trade take the place between the two countries when the ratio of the comparative cost of the producing goods are different. Second, most important is the country would the specialization in the producing that the commodity in which has the comparative advantage. Next point is theory of rent. David Ricardo, who first developed a theory in 1817 to explain the origin and nature of economic rent. David Ricardo used the economic and rent to analyze a particular question in the Napoleonic War. It's happened in time period 1805 to 1815. There were large rise in corn and land price. Did the rise in the land prices force up the price of the corn, or did the higher price of the corn increase the demand for the land and so push up the land prices? Ricardo defined the that portion of the produce of the earth which is paid to the landlord for the use for the original and indestructible power of the soil. In shortly, in this theory of the rent is a nothing but the producer surplus or differential grain, and it's found in the land only. Did the rise in the land prices force up the price of the corn, or did the higher price of the corn increase the demand for the land and so push up land prices? Ricardo defined the range definition is that portion of the produce of the earth which is the paid to the landlord for the use for the original and undestructible power of the soil. In this theory, which is theory of the rent is nothing but the producer's surplus or differential gain, and it is found in the land only. David Ricardo given the two main reasons for the rent arises. Firstly, scarcity of the land as a factor, and second, difference in the fertility of the soil. Firstly, we discuss the scarcity of the rent. Ricardo assumed that the land had only one use, to grow corn. This means that is the supply was fixed. If price of the land was totally determined by the demand for the land. In other words, all the price of the factor of the production in perfectly inelastic in supply is economic rent. It has no transfer earning. It was the higher price of the corn which caused in the increase in the demand for the land and a rise in the prices, rather than the price of the land pushing up for the price of corn. In this analysis depend on the assumption that a land has only one use. In the real world, a particularly piece of land can be put to many different uses. This means it's the supply for the any one use in elastic, so that is the happen transfer earning. Second point is explaining about the differential rent. According to David Ricardo, rent of the land arises because the different plot of the land have a different degree of the production power. Some land are the more fertile than other, so there are different grades of the land. The difference between the produce of the superior lands and that of the inferior lands is rent. That is the call of differential rent. From the Ricardian theory, we can show the relationship between the rent and price. Since the market price of the wheat is determined by the cost of the marginal producer, and since for this the marginal producer rent are zero, David Ricardo conclude that the economic rent is not determined of the market price, rather price of the wheat is determined solely by the market demand for the wheat and the availability of the fertile lands. Next point is theory of rents. David Ricardo was the first economist to discuss the idea of the rent or benefit that accrue to the owners of the assets solely due to their the ownership rather than their the contribution to any actual production activity. In this original application, agricultural economics, the theory of the rent show that the benefit of the rise in grain price will tend to accrue the owner of the agricultural land in the form of rents paid by the tenant farmer. David Ricardo's idea was the later also applied to political economics in this idea of the rent seeking, where the owner of the asset the benefit from the public policies that they directly increase rent toward the have and the act of the incentive to the influence by public policy. Next point is Ricardian equivalence. In public finance, David Ricardo wrote the whether the government chooses to the finance is the expenditure through the immediate taxation or the through the borrowing and deficit spending. The result for the economy will be equivalence if the taxpayer are the rational. then they will the account of the any expected increase in the future taxation to the finance current deficit by the saving on account of equivalence to the current deficit spending. So the net changes to the total spending will be zero. So if the government engage in deficit spending to the boost the economy, the private spending will just fall by the equivalence amount of the people save more, and the net effect of the aggregate economy will be a wash. Next point is explain about the technological changes. David Ricardo concerned about the impact of the technological changes on the labor in the short term. In 1821, he covenanted that the substitution of the machinery for the human labor is the often very injurious to the interest of the class of labor. After that, David Ricardo idea of the technological changes in the now formulated in the modern form. Next point is declining profit in other industry. According to David Ricardo, the profit of the farmer regulated the profit of the all other trades. David Ricardo used the agriculture profit as the basis, and it's the agriculture profit which determine the industrial profit. The money rate of the profit earned to capitalists must be equal in the equilibrium in the both the agriculture and industry. The rate of the profit in the agriculture sector determined the rate of the profit in the industry sector of the economy. Thus, when the profit decline in the agriculture sector, it also decline in the industrial sector. The industry sector would have the rise the wages the laborer with the increase in the price of the corn, and which is turned the reduce the profit. Thus, the price of the corn determines the rate of the profit in industry. When the profit decline in the agriculture sector, it's decline in all trades. Next point is other sources of capital accumulation. According to David Ricardo, is of the view that the economic development depend upon the difference between the production and consumption. Is stressed on the increasing production and reducing the unproductive consumption. The productivity of the labor can be increased through the technological changes and the better organization, and thereby stimulating capital accumulation. But the use of machine will the employ less the worker, which the lead to the unemployment and the reduce the wages, seen the economic condition of the workers decrease with the employment of the more machines. So Professor David Ricardo regarded the technological condition as the given the constant. Taxes are the sources of the capital accumulation in the hand on the other governments. Also, the taxes adversely affect the investment. Therefore, the debit record is not a favor in the imposition of the taxes, or the taxes reduce the income, profit, and capital accumulation. David Ricardo in the favor of the free trade as the important factor of the development of the country. Free trade provide the vast opportunities of the investment to capitalist. The capitalist can make the investment in the export oriented industry and earn the profit. The reinvestment of the profit by the capitalist will further enhance the development activities. And the last point is stationary state. When the economic development process, the real wages rate remain at the subsistence level and the profit tend to fall. When the capital accumulation rise with the increase in profit, total output increase with the rise of the wages in fund. With the increase in the wages fund, population increases, which the rise the demand for the corn and is the price. As the population increase, inferior grade land cultivation to the meet the increase in demand for corn. David Ricardo assumed that the labor and landlords spend all their the income on the consumption, hence the save nothing. The saving is done by the capitalist for the profit earner, but the society progresses, the share of the profit begin the decline. Fall in the rate of the profit, slackness of the process of the capital accumulation, and the development receive a setback, and the this stage there is no further increase in capital, and the economy entire in the stationary state. In this state, capital accumulation stops, the population does not grow, the wage rate is the subsistence level, and the technology's process ceases. The basis causal force in the scheme in the fact of the diminishing return in the agriculture, a grim tendency which can be postponed the temporary by the technical progress. But technical progress cannot be prevented in the ultimate disappearance of the profit and the one set of the stationary state. The phenomenon of the stationary state is with the increase in capital accumulation, profit, wages tend to the increase and the rise in the wages bring about a decline in profit. Ricardian system of development formulated the certain interrelationship among the capital, population, and output. On the basis of this relationship, it traced the course of the rent, wages, and profit every time, and finally it concerted with the celebrated forecast of the eventual advent of a stationary state. In briefly, we understand this concept of Ricardian system of development formulated certain interrelationship among the capital, population, and output. On this basis of this relation, it traced the course of rent, wages, and profit every time, and finally it concurred with the celebrated forecast of the eventual advent of the stationary state. Ricardian thoughts try to deal with the various problems related to development, is determine the relative shares of the different agents of the production in national income. The economy in the model is considered to be ever changing with the passage of the time till it reach the stationary state. So in this session, we complete all concepts related to David Ricardo, and also we explain the contribution of the David Ricardo in economy. So we will see you next video with next economist. So thank you.